Like I said before, if you don't want to stand, there's chairs up in front, or you can nudge one of your friends to move over one empty chair and make room. Otherwise, it looks like we're going to have standing room only tonight. So let me introduce myself. My name is Galen Yeager. I'm the new ER here at the Beartooth Elks Lodge. Actually, I was installed here last night, so this is my first public forum. For first timers, I just want to let you know bathrooms are located on that side, men's and women's, and actually you know where the bar's at if you get thirsty. So before we get started, let's all stand and pledge our flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. This community forum is being put on by Terry Durham. Terry Durham is an Elk member. She has been for close to, 2 years? And she approached our board here a few weeks back and wanted to find out if she could use our lodge for our community water runoff community forum for information for you. And I'm sure you're going to have a lot of questions, but she's got a panel of experts up here. So we, as the Elks members, we thought it would be an outstanding opportunity for the affected community, you people, to hear from the experts what they think could happen, what we can do to take probably help prevent it. But with that, one other thing is, Terry is putting this forum on, or community forum on, with the expense coming out of her pocket. So I'll have out on the table where all the cookie goodies are, there's a donation jar. If you feel that you can help Terry out with financing some of her out-of-pocket expenses, that would be appreciated. So with that, Terry, I'll turn it over to you and let you continue on.
So welcome. I'm Terry Durbin. I'm a resident of Red Lodge. I'm a city council person for Ward 2, and I'm also a proud member of this lodge. So welcome. This is really what the Elks do best. They open their doors to the entire community, and they provide an inviting and comfortable venue for people to engage, which is really important. So I want to thank the lodge for putting this on for us. I'd also I'd also like to say thank you to a few other people that have helped make this possible in companies, and one is our friends at the Mountain FM. They provided public service announcements for this event, so thank you to them.
Better?
Is that better? The other people I would like to thank are the Red Lodge Chamber of Commerce, because they gave us prominent placing in the chamber chats, and so we appreciate that, Sherry. We want to thank Montana Realty, because if it wasn't for them, we wouldn't have all that printed material that's out there. So they were nice enough to donate that. And I wanted to thank our friends at the Red Lodge Foundation for providing the whiteboard that our speakers are going to use. So you're going to be able to identify, this is being put on by a group of concerned citizens that are your neighbors. And you're going to be able to identify most of them because they're going to have little white tags on today. So if you want to know who's behind all this, the motivating factor, and the ones that made this happen, it's really this whole group. The other thing I wanted to do was recognize our Carbon County Commissioners, Scott Miller, Scott Blaine, and Bill Bullock. They've been vocal and involved in helping our community deal with and recover from the 2022 flood. So we want to thank them and recognize them. Another person I'd like to recognize today is Tim Nottingham, who's the mayor of Fromberg. And he's in our audience, and I want to thank you for attending. And you may have seen the piece on Positively Montana on Sunday where he was featured. And he's an inspiration for his proactive community involvement addressing problems. So I just wanted to tell people that he's to be commended for what he's doing in Montana. So I thought I'd start out too and provide a little bit of background information for people. In late February, the city said publicly in the Carbon County News that reparations for damage or mitigation of anticipated damage on private property is the responsibility of the homeowner, so it's all on us. As a result of that article, a group of neighbors in Ward 3 got together and started discussing what they could do as a neighborhood to be prepared in case of flooding this year. So Jody Ronning, myself, and Shinta Daniels got the word of this meeting, and we decided we wanted to play an active role in making something happen. And then in mid-March, the county put an article in the paper that was really helpful because it had specific things that homeowners could do to protect their homes and property. And so what we did is we organized this meeting to build on that. And we figured people would want to come together in a community setting and address concerns that all of us share. So thank you for coming. The meeting is going to be focused on what we can do as residents to prepare in advance for spring runoff and potential flooding. And of course, all of us hope that doesn't happen, but some of us want to be prepared. We've gathered industry professionals to address your questions regarding protections of home and personal property. And as your neighbors, Jody, Cinta, and I have coordinated this community meeting on behalf of everyone who might be affected this year. So we've opened this up not only to our friends in Red Lodge, but all of Carbon County and anyone else who might find this information useful. So one thing I do have to note though is that the views and opinions expressed are ours personally as city council members and may not reflect the views or positions of the city of Red Lodge or the city council. And so as kind of an overview for what we're going to do tonight is the first part of the evening will be we'll have our industry professionals introducing themselves and addressing their areas of expertise. Jody Ronnie is going to provide resources for understanding your flood insurance options at this point. We have Micah Hoffman, who will be providing information on local resources for flood preventative supplies. And then we have Sandy Connolly, and Sandy's going to be talking about opportunities to volunteer for flood prevention efforts within your neighborhood. So during the second part of this meeting, we're going to address questions that you out in the audience have for our panel. And we also had gotten some questions that people submitted to us in advance. So we'll try to get things started with those questions. I think a lot of them are very good questions that you'll be interested in, and then we're going to open it up to the community here. The one thing I would ask is that courtesy be extended throughout this evening. This is a very positive community event, and we want to keep it on a positive note. Our Q&A session is in good hands. Joel Todd is going to do this for us. And at the completion of the Q&A, our guest speakers will be available back in the bar area to meet with you one-on-one and answer more questions you may have. So to start the evening, I'd like to introduce Bill Bullock, our County Commissioner for Red Lodge, and thanks to all of you for coming. We really appreciate it.
First of all, thank you, Terry and Jim, for putting this together. Thank you, everybody, for coming out. I'm glad to see everybody got dug out, get a little touch of winter here the last couple of weeks, which does necessitate what we're talking about tonight. In your downtime, if you may want to look at the projections for this coming weekend, where snowpack is in the specific basins. I think they said Rock Creek Basin is at about 112 to 115% of normal. Willow Creek and Upper Red Lodge Creek are about 256% of normal. And we're going to get warm with a quickness. Take a look and see. That's a pretty good step folks can take on their own. Keep an eye on the weather. There are stream gauges that are in place above town here. There's one in between the north and the east, the north and the south bridge on the east side road. So it is being monitored insofar as water flows and everything specific to town. This morning I had a chance to talk with Tyler Kern, who's with Wadsworth Brothers Construction, working on the main project on the south end of town. Very candid conversation, asking him point blank any consideration for this. Probably the best response I could ever have heard. He very calmly said, we've done this before. If it gets bad, we'll button up what we got, we'll pull out, and we'll take it from there. Not the best news, but it's reality. And reassure everybody here, at least on the county end of things, if everything goes south, we do have another water event that we'll do just like we did last year. Respond, try and get things mitigated, try and get people back to their homes. It'll be a carbon copy of last year. I sincerely hope we don't have to do that again because it was a lot of work, but we'll do it again if we have to. Everybody's struggling with this, and the simple reality of a flood is it's the worst possible thing you can ever go through. Your entire life is floated out of your house, dumped on the street, and buried in the mud. And you got to try and dig it out and figure it out. And it's awful. There's no other way to say it. On the county side of things, and I think there's a lot of folks in the same position. And it's not one thing, it's a lot of things. And one of the things I think we're all struggling with is the system we're dealing with when it comes to waterways. It's a broken system. And that's not picking on any of the individual agencies. It's the system we got to go through to try and make something work. We deal with 5 different agencies that there is no requirement that they've got to talk to one another or guide anybody to the next one. That's a problem. At the county level, we've been pushing. We've been dealing with our congressional delegation. We met with the regional director, the Western Regional Director for Army Corps, Colonel Hines, and they were able to come up with a more broadly based permitting system or permit that would give a little bit of relief, but it's not universal. If you get time, take a look at that. I gave Terry a bunch of copies to pass out. There's copies at the county office. Please get one and read through it. I know sandbags have been talked about a lot. We've got 15,000 sandbags right now available at the county. Let me step back. They're not available right now because of what it is and the commodity nature of it. We're a little reluctant to turn loose sandbags just because of what. Let's be honest, folks. Everybody's worried, and I get that. We just can't live in a heightened sense of insecurity. When the time comes, we will have sand and we will have sandbags available to fill at the south end of the fairgrounds on the county road lot. You can't miss it. Go up Airport Road, turn right like you're going to the rodeo arena, it'll be there when the time comes. The other thing is we have to recognize there might be the outside chance we might get out of this. We don't know, and that's the real troubling part about this water stuff and why everything's dumped back on the individual homeowner. We don't know what's going to happen. We can't tell where the water's going to go. We can only mitigate, individuals can on their end. Hang in there. Listen to these folks. Visit with them a little bit beforehand. They've got a little bit of steps that the individual homeowner can take to ensure the safety of their home and the preservation of their home. So take some time, pay attention. I'll stick around. I'll be out in the audience. I'll be out in the lobby. Feel free to come up and visit. If there's anything specific you'd like to visit about, my ears are open, my phone's on. Take the time. Like I said, we got through last year. We will get through this year. And at least on the county end of things, we will respond in the same manner we did previously. Be patient, be a good neighbor, and let's hope for the best. Thank you.
So now we're going to talk about plans to prepare and mitigate for the 2023 spring runoff. We have gentlemen here from Dynamic Analysis Engineering Consulting, that's Sam Hensler over on the end. And then we have 2 representatives from WWC Engineering and Greg Jones, who's the associate engineer, and then Greg Reed, who's branch manager in around the building. So gentlemen, I don't know how you, each one of you want to come up here and do an introduction.
Evening, everyone. I'm Greg Reed with WWC Engineering. I'll introduce myself and Greg Jones. We're both civil engineers. The type of work that we do is floodplain related work, floodplain permitting, drainage, and grading. So questions that we could answer would be things exterior to your house out to the roadway. If anybody has any questions for us, we'll be here through the night and out in the bar area later. In addition, if anybody would like to talk to us individually at their property, next week we're going to try and plan a day to come up. If you'd like to try and get with us and get one of our cards, you can schedule maybe a 30-minute meeting at your property and meet with one of us.
Hi, my name is Sam Hensler with Dynamic Analysis. I'm a structural engineer, and my specialty is in forensic engineering, which is assessing the existing condition of any structure, and especially any structure that's in a state of failure, and determining what can be done to restore it or prevent failure from occurring. So in this event, last year, we assessed a lot of properties that had damage from the flood, and talked with a handful of homeowners about what could be done to prevent that in the future, and how to assess their house and their property to ensure that it didn't have any structural damage that needed to be repaired. So my expertise and questions that you can ask me are going to be related to the house itself or the structure that you're concerned about, and any temporary structures that you might build in order to divert flow. Thank you.
So now we're going to have Jody Ronning, and we're lucky that she's not only a council person, but she's also knows a lot about insurance. So Jody's going to come up and just talk a little bit about what resources we have here tonight to talk about your options for insurance going forward.
Hi, I'm Jody Ronning. I'm also your City Council Ward 3 representative. And Terry made me write this down so I wouldn't ramble on. Well, good evening. Unfortunately, as many found out last June, homeowners, renters insurance, and business insurance does not typically cover flood. If you're thinking about purchasing flood insurance this year, most flood policies have a waiting period before coverage will go into effect. Remember, flood insurance coverage is not just for your primary home. You can also purchase coverage as a business owner, commercial property owner, rentals, or the contents. As if you're a renter, you can insure your personal property. You don't have to be in a special flood hazard area to purchase flood insurance. In fact, most of the property that flooded last year was not in that special flood hazard area that we used to call the 100-year floodplain. Tonight, we have invited all of our local Red Lodge agents to this meeting to answer all of your flood insurance questions. Unfortunately, the timing was not right for State Farm and Farmers. Both Patty from State Farm and Brian from Farmers said they would be happy to answer any questions next week when they're back in the office. Heather Cope and Rebecca Neibauer are here from Hub Insurance, and Josh O'Shea is here from Mandeville. They will be located out at the tables out in the bar area. Please feel free to sit down and chat with them. They'll be happy to answer any questions that you may have about flood insurance, and they're also happy to help you out in their office. They're there 5 days a week. So Faithful Disaster Restoration is also here tonight, and they will have some tips on what to do first if the worst happens and you need to call a water restoration company. Thank you.
Okay, and now we're going to talk about flood protection resources. So we have Micah Hoffman, who is with H&H Enterprises, and everybody knows him around town. He's an electrical contractor. So Micah, you've got that.
Wow, what a crowd. Thanks for coming out. I'll be the only non-celebrity, non-expert to speak to you tonight, so bear with me. I want to quickly discuss a couple of options for you folks in regard to sandbags and what you can do to prevent, if you didn't have groundwater last year or surface water, you had water come up through your plumbing system. there are some options for that. So I'll start with the sandbags. Basically, there's 3 ways to get it done. Bill stole a little bit of my thunder here. I did not know that the county was going to have sandbags up there, so that's good to know. But we were preparing to have bulk sand dumped around town and us fill the empty bags. That's obviously the most cost-effective way to get that done. It's also the most labor-intensive way to get that done. Another way to do it would be, and Purcell Sandy Gravel would be a good resource for that. And I've spoken to him, and he's he was anxious to help with that effort. Another option would be at Ace Hardware, you can buy the 60-pound pre-filled bags, and you can actually buy them by the pallet load. I believe they come 42 on a pallet or something. Bring your F-250 in there. Frank has offered, and maybe I shouldn't speak for him. Is he here tonight?
Yeah.
There he is. Thank you, Frank, for coming. He's offered to put them on your F-250 and you can drive them right to your property and distribute them that way. Obviously, there's an additional cost to that wouldn't be involved with filling your own bags, but there's a huge labor savings as well. So it's maybe worth considering. And then thirdly, another product that you might not be aware of, it's fairly new, it's called Quickcrete has a quick dam flood barrier product. So these are lightweight, compact, inflatable sandbags basically. When they're exposed to water, they gain mass and weight and essentially become a sandbag. So you would need someone's help. Let's say if you're an older citizen and you would need someone's help to place these sandbags. I could not project the cost for those because they are anywhere from 2 feet to 10 feet depending on your needs. Everyone's property is going to have a unique, vulnerable situation. But again, they are available locally here at ACE. Talk to Frank. I know he's also anxious to help with this effort. He spent quite a bit of time talking to me about it, and I appreciate that. Lastly, like I kind of mentioned before, sandbags will protect you from surface water coming in doors and windows. Something else I forgot. To use the sandbags, and whether you use, no matter which application you use of the 3, you have to place plastic against the area that you want to protect first. Say it's a basement window, plastic tape, maybe some sealant. Say it's a front door, same thing. Plastic tape, sealant, then use sandbag against that. If you had water come into your basement through your plumbing system, say through floor drains, they're basically inflatable plugs that you stick down, pull your floor drain cap, stick the inflatable plug down there, to keep the water from coming up through your floor drains. In my situation, I have 2 properties that the septic system actually leaves the house about 2 foot above my basement floor, 4-inch pipe. I will probably go in there and cut a ball valve on my pipe, stick that in place, and if the worst should happen and we need to evacuate, I'll get in there and I'll shut that valve off and evacuate as required. I don't know the validity of that. That's just what I'm going to do. Maybe I shouldn't even be suggesting it to you, but maybe it's something that could be valuable to the rest of you. That's about all I have. I'm sure you've got plenty of questions for the experts, so I'll sit down. But I do want to thank you again tonight for coming and participating in this exercise in self-government. Thank you.
Thank you, Micah. So now the next one that's going to be up here is Sandy Connolly, and what's really good about this is going to be kind of our next steps. So once we figure out what we want to do to protect our homes, what can we do in neighborhoods to kind of work together where possible. So I think she's going to be trying to appeal both to homeowners and to those people out here that came that would like to help volunteer. So Sandy?
The committee really struggled with what to do. In other words, do we try to keep the water in the creek, which would be the ideal, but it seemed way problematic and probably not really gonna happen. So we felt that the best way to do this was for everyone to protect their own home. And we wanna make sure everybody gets information. So I'm gonna go off the script that Terry wrote for me. I wrote one, but she rewrote it. I'm so glad you guys came out tonight. Welcome. I'm Sandy Conley. I'm managing the volunteer efforts here in Red Lodge with regards to preventative measures we can take to protect our homes and properties. I have focused on identifying residential blocks that were affected by the flood last year, and I've generated a map. The next task is to identify a volunteer that will function as a block coordinator for each of those residential blocks. We thought it was easier to break it down by block. As a block coordinator, we're asking them to maintain a list of contact information for neighbors on your block. I've already taken a first pass at collecting that information and have a few block coordinators already. The advantage of doing that is a lot of these homes are rented, and if they're rented, then we don't always know who the renters are, and we just want to make sure this year everyone gets evacuated and that there's one person that has all the contact information for that block, and that would be the block coordinator. The other really fundamental thing for a block coordinator is it's a great way for us to send out information. We can send it out to the block coordinators en masse, and then they can send it out to everyone on their block. So as information comes down the pipe, we know that there's going to be some work done on Rock Creek where they're going to be removing debris. They're not going to be dredging, but they're going to be removing debris. So there's lots of things that are going to be happening in the next couple of months. And we're hoping that we don't have to worry about flood, but it is what it is. The other thing is having that list by block. It's a good way to share information on flood prevention and supplies. So a block could, in essence, buy the supplies for the whole block as a group and hopefully find a central location for the bags or for the sandbags. And it would be nice to do it block by block by block. Our goal is to take our experiences from last year and use that knowledge to be better prepared for this year. I do have a table in the lobby there and with the bar that if you stop by, see if we already have a block coordinator for your block, and if not, it's not a huge time-consuming project. It's just that we want to have a nice communication tool for any kind of information that's going on. So if anybody has any questions, stop by my table.
Okay, it sounds like it was outed a bit in this last thing, but that's okay. That's okay. So next we're going to have the audience Q&A, and as I said, we did have some questions that were submitted in advance. So I'm going to leave it up to Joel to start that off.
Thank you, Terry. Quite honestly, the number of people here we did not anticipate. So part of the problem is going to be that there's going to be a lot of questions we're probably not going to get to tonight. And the plan that we made for these people to be available one-on-one is probably going to become difficult for everybody to get a chance to meet with them. I want to highlight something that one of the engineers said. They are going to be available to come out here next week and meet with an individual homeowner and try to figure out for that person's property what the person can do to improve your protection from the possibility of flood. And they're willing to donate a half an hour of their time for each individual homeowner. Now, part of those recommendations may include getting some professional assistance, and that may then turn into a fee for service, but these guys are giving their time because they have an interest in the community and they want to make themselves available, and obviously it's an opportunity for them to get in front of prospective clients. But, you know, everybody here, I hope, can be patient by the fact that we're a little overwhelmed by the size of this crowd, in the sense we were hoping to have more one-on-one time, and that's just not what's going to be. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to begin with a couple of questions that I think are pretty much universal questions. Yeah, I'm a bull in a china shop, my wife will tell you that. But at the same time, once we get through a couple of the things that I think are pretty much common to everybody, then we're going to open it up. And we're going to take questions from the floor, and whatever the question is, if there's anybody that can't hear it, I'll repeat it to the best of my ability, and then we'll get one of the people here to answer it. This is not going to become a bitch session. We're not going to sit here and talk about what was or wasn't done last year, and we're not going to complain about the commissioners or the city. We're talking about what can we do this year in anticipation of a possible flood to try to protect ourselves. So I would appreciate everyone's cooperation in focusing on why we're here tonight. If you got a bitch, go see Bill in his office, okay? Really. Go to a city council meeting and bitch to your heart's content. You know, they meet the second and fourth Tuesdays of the month. And they're more than happy, well, maybe not happy, but they're more than willing to listen to you at an appropriate venue. Tonight we're here about trying to help ourselves. So the first question that I have, and I'll ask which one of the panel members can answer it, what are the best practices for protecting basement windows and doors from water seepage or flooding? Which one of you wants to answer that?
All right, I'm sure this will spill over into lots of the other questions, but it's probably a good time to start talking about sandbags and how to use them. Sandbags have been used for a long time. They're incredibly versatile, portable, cheap. The Army uses them, which means that they're probably a pretty good tool that's been heavily researched and still used today. So we're gonna rely mostly on sandbags to divert flow away from your house. There is a proper way to do it, and I'll try and explain that here. I guess first off, if you're filling sandbags or even handling sandbags, most of the time they're treated so that they have long shelf lives, so they're shelf stable. And that can be irritating, especially in your eyes or your mouth, so wear gloves, don't rub them on your face. And when you fill them up with sand, you want to make sure that you can create flat surfaces. We're going to make them essentially like brick stacks. So if you overfill them, then they're going to be, you know, perfectly round in cross section, and you can't stack them. They're just going to fall over. They're not going to hold any water back. So you want to leave enough give in the bag so that when you lay it flat, you're going to walk on it to flatten it out so it looks more like this. So that should be a properly stuffed sandbag. It should be flat on the bottom. You should be able to walk across it, flatten it out on the top. And then we're going to just keep on stacking them just like bricks so they're staggered. Everyone's seen a brick wall. It's going to look like that. If you have there's a couple options. If you have a basement window well, you're best off creating an archway around it. So if you have an opening in your house, and you have a window there, you're best off to create sort of an archway around the window well or the opening. I mean, honestly, if you have doors, you need to be able to get in and out of them. You need operable space. That will still work best. So we're going to make a bit of an archway around any openings like that. Like Mike said, you could also go directly against the glass and put plastic up, and you can put wood up and then put the bags right up next to it. So if the opening that you're trying to seal off is conducive to that, then that's great. That saves the amount of bags that you need. Ultimately, there's going to be a lot of factors in play. The biggest one is going to be time and resources. If you're really well prepared, you might have tons of time and tons of resources to be able to do this. You could build a whole wall around your property, and that's great. But, if you have little notice and not enough materials, then you're gonna be looking for where you can economically protect the house. So realistically, we're gonna be protecting windows and doors, things where water can get in really easily, so we can slow the rate of water entering into the basement area, and ideally be able to remove it at roughly the same rate that it's coming back in. So, talk really briefly about different types of foundations that I see really frequently in Red Lodge 2, because certain things are important depending on what kind of foundation you have. If you've got the traditional concrete foundation, pretty much any option is going to be available to you. If you have what a lot of houses have in the area that was affected are the big blocks of granite foundations, those ones are pretty resilient. You want to be careful about adding too much weight immediately outside of the house. So there's a couple options for stacking sandbags. The economical way to get a short wall, 2 to 3 feet or so, is just a linear stack of sandbags, so they're all just right on top of each other. Kind of like that, but if you need to go taller than 3 feet, then you got to do a pyramid shape. So, it'll be roughly 2.5 to 3 times wider than it is tall, so it's going to take a ton of sandbags to go up that high. So if you have a foundation that's made of rocks, especially if you have a rubble foundation that looks like literally river rocks that were stacked on each other and have a little bit of grout holding them together, those you want to be really careful about doing this pyramid stack right next to the wall, because once we have a bunch of water next to it and we add all that weight, we surcharge the soil and potentially overwhelm the capacity of that type of foundation to resist that soil, and you can blow your foundation wall in. So we don't want to do that. The vertical wall will work pretty much for any of the types of foundations. If you do have the rubble foundation, the one that's like river rocks and various small rocks that don't look like they're really well seated together, you want to be careful about how much plastic you use. If the water does come up really high, again, we actually kind of want some water to come in so that we don't overwhelm the strength of a foundation like that. We don't have a lot of capacity to push back. So depending on your type of foundation will determine how much effort you really want to put into keeping water out and how much weight you want to stack immediately next to the house. But ultimately, stacking sandbags around your openings, whatever method is available to you and that you have time for and resources for is going to be what you want to do. And then secondly, keep in mind that we're not going to waterproof the basement. Water is going to come in. We want to slow the rate that water is coming in so that we can handle it more easily. Ideally, we can slow the rate down long enough that the surcharge of water drops back down and you're able to manage the amount of water coming into the house the whole time. If you have pumps, some pumps especially in the house, and you don't have so much water that you need to turn off your breakers, then you might be able to stay on top of the amount of water that's coming in, especially for a lot of the houses that have the wooden floor basements that are built about a foot off the ground. Those will be really handy to be able to put pumps underneath the floor and remove water before it starts to affect the finished materials. But just keep in mind that even if water is coming in, that's not a failure of your protection, of your mitigation. Really what we're trying to do is slow how quickly water is coming in. If it's coming in torrents, then we've kind of lost that battle, and we just want to unplug and move on. But if we can slow the rate of water coming in, then you might be able to stay on top of getting water removed so that we're not causing as much damage. Hopefully that answers that.
That's Sam Hensler, by the way, from Dynamic Analysis. Sam is a professional civil engineer, so he knows what he's talking about. And to sum up and to try to connect something that Sandy was talking about, obviously if you have a group of you that get together you'll be able to fill more sandbags together and be able to cooperate. So if you can get some structure of volunteers in your neighborhood with a few people who can do that, then you're going to be in a position where you'll be able to help each other and actually put the sandbags where they need to be. The one thing he said at the end, which I think is important, is if you're going to be overwhelmed with water, then don't stand there and work with a sandbag. Get yourself to safety. And that's, just common sense. And that's part of the process that you have to keep your brain engaged. Okay? The next thing is, the question is it better to remove things from your basement, or is there something else that should be done in order to protect your belongings? Who wants to address that? All right, Sam's coming back.
I think this one you don't necessarily need an engineer to answer for you. It's really just going to depend on what you have and what the situation is. We don't even know if it is going to flood, and if it does flood, we don't know how much it's going to flood, or if it's even going to cause as much damage as it did last year, or if it's going to cause more, or if it's going to happen at all. Ultimately, it's going to be your decision on what makes sense to remove. If there's something that's valuable, you should get it out of there. I wouldn't go so far as to remove your utilities, like your furnace or anything like that. I think that'd be a little extreme. You might be able to, and Mike probably would be able to answer this better than I can, you might be able to remove some circuitry that would get fried, and you can limit the amount of damages on some of those sorts of utilities. But if something's important to you, it's invaluable, and it's down in an area that could get wet, you should probably move it elsewhere. But it's really going to depend on the situation. I don't think anyone should, especially the people that happen to reside in a duplex where they live downstairs and upstairs is available to them. I don't think it's pragmatic to move all of your belongings out just in case. But if the warning signs are there, if it looks like we're going to continue to get snow and it's going to be 90 degrees all of a sudden, then maybe it's time to consider moving out what's important to you to either higher ground. Maybe your upstairs neighbor will be able to house some of those things. So paying attention to the forecast and to any warning signs that we're getting from any officials about what to expect is going to be an important role in determining what to do and when and how to act. So that's really just up to you.
Terry's husband, Jim, where are you? Raise your hand. Jim, you know the name of a company that sells sandbags that's very easy to remember, which is? Sandbaggy. Yeah, I know, it sounds like a joke, but it's not. You can actually go online, right? And order sandbags from Sandbaggy. So that's something that if any of you guys want to try to acquire sandbags now, that's a company that you can do that.
When will the county let us make it available?
When will the county make the sandbags available, Bill?
So our authorization for bags was provided by state DES, and they're regulated by their protocol. We tried to ask and make them more available. As soon as something happens, we will have the sand and bags available. But we were given the guidance that something has to be happening.
How will you let us know?
So two parts of that, and I'm glad we were just talking about that today. There's many folds to that because there was some shortcomings, but it goes back to the two primary sources are Code Red and Carbon Alert. Now, those alerts are typically something you have to sign up for. If you haven't signed up for Code Red or Carbon Alert, I would encourage you to do so because that's where the majority of those notifications would come from. So that was a shortcoming both in technology and initiative on everybody's behalf. I won't say, that's just reality. If you don't have it, get it. It doesn't cost you anything. Sign on for it and get the notifications.
Yeah, Code Red Carbon Alerts was very active during COVID, and it's really a good service. Once you sign up for it, you can get information on a basically as you need basis. So, as Bill said, you got to sign up for it, but once you have it, you can access it and use it. So that's something you should follow up with. Carrie?
Yeah, the one thing I just wanted to point out is that this is a matter of time.
You got to come up here.
The one thing we just wanted to point out is that it's usually a matter of timing, and a lot of us that did that fire drill last year don't want to go through that again. So really what we're trying to focus on with this volunteer group is to see if we, as soon as we can get some of the snow moved, that we can start preparing sandbags now before we're kind of in panic mode in building them. So I just wanted to put that distinction that of course, if there's emergency, we can certainly count on the DES, but a lot of the stuff while we're talking about the different places you can purchase sandbags is if we can kind of get a head start on that and have them, kind of in place before something happens. So, point that out.
Terry, is it also accurate that DES is going to have a public meeting?
Okay,
Bill, can you address it?
So it's not so much a public meeting, but it's referred to commonly as a tabletop exercise. Next Wednesday, the 12th at noon. Terry, where's that?
Fairgrounds.
At the Gruel Building at Fairgrounds. Now with that, again, it's more, and everybody's welcome to come if you want, but it's more of a, let's just call it a litmus test. We learned a lot in the last year, but then again, going through it, it's literally walking through a scenario such as this. And it may be beneficial so you can see where the triggers are pulled, where the responsibility lies, and what the actions are that are taken in order to respond to something like this. And we had one in Fromberg. Tim was here, where did Nottingham go? Oh yeah, Tim's here. We had one over in Fromberg here last month. I think it was effective. I think it identified some of the shortcomings we do have, just insofar as the communication and those initial calls and reports. 911's going to be your first thing to say, oh crap, something's happened, and then it's going to go out from there. And just like last year, hopefully better, and really hopefully not at all. But we are prepared. We've been talking about this ad nauseum for the last year. We said we'll get through it again if it comes.
All right, I'm going to open this up I'm going to open up the floor pretty soon. Are portable generators a good thing to have available, or is there some issues with using portable generators?
So, portable generator would be valuable to have, as Sam was hinting at earlier. It's possible that at a certain point in your house, you're going to shut off the power, you're going to try and get out of there. But for running sump pumps or other variable pumps, you might be trying to use them based off electricity. If you don't have a portable generator available, you may have to, when you shut your house down, just completely abandon the pumps. The one thing about it that has been discussed a little bit before would be the potential issue of carbon monoxide. So do make sure you keep your portable generator outside, up out of the water.
And make sure you have enough fuel for the generator.
Yeah, obviously, if you're going to operate it, you need fuel, but you need to be cognizant of the carbon monoxide issue, so you need to keep it in a place where it's not going to build up and cause something even worse. Okay, we're going to open this up now, and anybody has a question, please stand up first, and I'll try and get to everybody that I can. Dave.
I wanted to add just an additional piece of information. Carbon alert, yes, very good. You saw up front, they're asking for email addresses. There's also an email set up, Red Lodge Flood Notification @gmail.com. If you want to send an email to that with either your email address or your text message, we've researched and we have found that we have the ability to send out basically a text message blast that is a unicast blast. So it's not a chain. Nobody else is going to have your information. Nobody's going to hit reply and respond to 1 million people. It's just a unicast notification that we can send out as information comes in. Oh, water's rising. Oh, it looks like kind of that last year we were looking to get information out quickly. Those are still great options, but this is another one we have set up so you can let them know, work with your block coordinators. Like I said, anybody wants to write that down right now, if you send an email to that, we'll get that information to those others as well.
Could you give that address again?
Red Lodge Flood let me make sure I read it right. I'm gonna say it's Red Lodge Flood Notification at Gmail.
Red Lodge Flood Notification at gmail.com.
.com. Yep. And again, it's not gonna be used for anything, it's never gonna be sent out in a mass blast. It's just a unicast way of notifying people real time, fast.
Go ahead.
Hi, my name's Mark Colvin, and I've got a huge question. We all know what caused, the water to jump out of the creek bed last year, and I believe it was already discussed how to keep the water in the creek bed. It's too late to do anything about it now, but what about all the log jams upstream? Those trees were ripped out last year, now they're laying loose all the way up in the canyon, and they're gonna be coming down with high water. What's gonna happen with those? Who's gonna take care of that?
I know Bill has an answer for that, but you're not gonna like me.
It's not an answer. This is the problem that we're dealing with a broken system. So this has been brought up June 14th of last year, June 30th of last year, all through July, August, every month, every day since then. We've been given the indication from state AES. They had come out and said they were going to roll out a system of removing wooded debris. They were supposed to show up this week. They didn't. They told us the 17th of April. I'm not going to count on that. My encouragement to you folks, if you see a tree in the river, if you have a problem with it, if you think it's a hazard, take it out. The answer overall, though, is that we got to hope for the best, because we've been stymied, we've been logjammed, we've gone through our congressional delegation, all the senators, all the congressmen, the Western Regional Director of Army Corps. They say they're working on it, but they also said they were working on trying to find us some resolve, because the reason why we went hell-bent for leather last year is because of this. Because we know what can happen, and we know we can get 5 feet of snow in a night. Clearly, we didn't know what we were talking about. But that's the frustration we're dealing with. It's trying to get this through. I hope they show up on the 17th. I hope they roll that out. But I'm not counting on it, because we can't.
Okay, well, I've got 2 huge log jams on my creek. I need to get rid of them, and now I gotta jump through all these hoops to get the right permits to do it.
Therein lies the problem. That's the broken system I'm referring to. You don't get to go to one-stop shop, and that's the problem. Why can't we get a one-stop shop? The pushback comes from the inability to do that, because again, you've got to go through floodplain, you've got to go through the NRC, you've got to go through Army Corps, you've got to go through Conservation District, and then you've got to go through Fish, Wildlife, and Parks to cover all the permitting things. And none of those agencies are required to talk to each other. They have their permit, they do their part, but therein lies the delay. The delay comes down to, and the problem we have with that is 6 to 8 months for a permit to do work gets us in a situation like Wadsworth is down the street. Again, Montana State Constitution allows you to protect your property. If you feel there's a hazard to your property, you're jeopardized. If it was me, I would make sure my property is not harmed.
Can I burn them?
If you think that's the right thing for you, I cannot argue with that. If you're not impacting your neighbor, if you're not hurting anybody else, I would not argue with that.
All right, perfect, thank you.
So Bart, the answer to your question is, there's a lot of things that should be done that aren't being done, which is one of the reasons why people need to do whatever they can do to protect their own property. Question in the back.
What is going on at Highway 212 at the 19th Street Bridge? What are they doing?
This is the Bill Bullock Show.
What they're doing at the 19th Street Bridge is trying to do anything and everything they can to rebuild the seawall and try and put us in a position to get ahead of where we were. Now, frustrating. The other side of that is the 19th Street Bridge, real or imagined, the reality is it's a county bridge. Now, MDT took that responsibility because of how we partnered with them last year. They took that repair on themselves. They've obligated to that. I talked with the foreman at Wadsworth this morning. And again, they get it. They're working on it. I have never seen a construction crew work those hours in those conditions. Those guys are out there, they deserve it, they really do. I've been in the construction industry for a fair amount of time. I've never seen anybody stand in water and waders when it's 32 below at 8 o'clock at night in the dark. So it's confusing, it's a mess, but they are doing everything they can to try and get it corrected.
Can I build on that?
Go ahead, Michael.
Ma'am, I also went up and spoke to the foreman at Wadsworth, and the reason they started 20 feet to the south of the bridge is because that piece is not, the tie-in is not designed yet. But the guy said more than likely what's gonna happen is we're gonna get to a point where they're gonna scrap, say, we're not gonna full design it, and we will have riprap in there before spring runoff. That's what the gentleman told me. So I don't know if that's, hopefully that's more reassuring to you to hear that, but he was dead set on, we will have something in there by spring runoff, whether it's a temporary measure or the full design.
Two questions. Do the big white sandbags that are in the ground now, near the channel, do those stay in there regardless?
We can't answer that.
Repeat.
We're getting off topic here too. So let's stay on topic in terms of what it is you can do with your property. Does anybody have any questions about their particular property?
Oh, no, I have a question in general.
Okay, you have a question about your
I
property?
just wanted a quick ad for Mark. You know, if you're gonna pull those trees out, it's probably fine, but it doesn't hurt to fill that permit out now, if you're planning on it. It does take about a month to get through.
I spent all last summer pulling trees out of that one log jam, and it's still right
And
3/4.
one thing I will say, floodplain requires that leaves the floodplain, but burning it is allowed. Like, that's a one way to get it out of the floodplain, is to pile it up and burn it. If you can do that,
Well, one of them's right in the middle of the creek, that's what backs it up with my car.
Okay, we're not here to have a dialogue. If you guys want to talk with each other, no, that's fine. And the fact that you guys are communicating with each other is a good thing, not a bad thing.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
I just wanted to mention something that I think Bill mentioned. So the Army Corps of Engineer has a new emergency permit that's available, and they were talking about a 15-day turnaround because they understand that people are in the position right now where they want something fast-tracked through, and that's, I believe, if you live in the floodway. So we do have some of those permits out there. The Army Corps did contact me about wanting to come out here and do a talk to people to explain that permitting process, since it's fairly new. It just was started, I think, March 17th. So it'll probably maybe be done through the city, and if it's not done through the city, we'll do something here again so that you guys are up on that in short order. So I did want people to know that there is that new permitting process.
In the floodway.
Yeah, if you're in the floodway.
Floodway, not floodplain.
Question?
Might be directed to Sandy, but there was kind of a disconnect with every single homeowner getting information in this particular area. There was knocks on the door, there was telephone calls, and still there was several people that just had no idea that the water was coming their way. It was in the middle of the night, so, I mean, fair, right? What can we do, what can I do to help to get more people on that list to be sure that we have the right information in place? I know we have a flood of volunteers that are willing to knock on the door or make a phone call, but how can we make sure that the system is complete in that area?
You know what, I just want to say, I would hope that people would be patient. The one thing, we do have that meeting that's coming up April 12th that Bill mentioned. And I think, I mean, I've been talking as being a council person, I've been talking to people in DES since the flood, and I do know that they know that there were some shortcomings and they're trying to address them. So I would say, let's give them the benefit of the doubt till at least when they have this meeting and they roll things out, because we don't know until we understand what they're going to be doing different to make sure that the system is even more efficient this year.
My concern is that we don't want to be a test subject again. And how would we know if we're actually efficient at what we're doing without adding to the database?
Well, what I would say is,
So specifically to answer your question, if you have neighbors, make sure they've got signed up with the carbon alert, code red, or both, to ensure that when that notification goes out, I'm not a tech person, maybe your neighbors are, maybe they aren't, but ask the question. That would be a really simple, easy, effective, long-term thing to help out your neighbor that is, like I said, it's pretty easy.
Yeah, I also think that if you could organize your block, the first thing you ought to do is make a phone list of everybody on the block who would need to be notified in case of emergency. And if everybody did that, block by block, then you could have one person for the block be in touch through like Carbon Alert, and then make sure with a phone chain that everybody is notified. So a little preparation now to get everybody in communication could go a long way later to make sure that the communication process is effective in making sure that everybody who needs to know to get out is notified. Okay? Any? Dave? Al Bloomer, I'm sorry, Al. I had Dave on the line.
302 Pioneer on the east side of the creek. The 13th Street Bridge is our only access over there. Has anybody looked at that to see if we should do anything to mitigate additional flood? It made it through the first flood, but are there some things that we should be doing now to that bridge to get us through the second flood?
You guys want to address that? Go ahead. This is really a government issue, I think, more than anything.
No.
But go ahead.
It's not a government issue. The 13th Street Bridge is a privately owned bridge by the island at Rock Creek. Find any one of the engineers, these guys, get the phone book, find one, have them do an assessment, and ask them about, so basically what the state does, MDT goes through every bridge in the county every year and does an evaluation. Good, bad, stable, not stable. Ask whatever your engineer is, see what they can give you for an assessment of that bridge, and they can look at your abutments and everything else that goes in. But I'd leave that up to you guys.
We've had the assessment. I'm just hoping that Sam will put us on his list next week and come and take a look at it.
I apologize for not knowing what I was talking about, but that's not the first time. Anybody else? Yes. I'm sorry, did you have a, let me ask this lady, she's been standing for a while.
Yeah, so I've seen that the snow is melting pretty quick. I just want to know within the next week the possibility of a flood. Like, is that gonna happen? It's gonna rain next week. It's gonna be 60 on Monday.
Anybody want to hazard a guess? Yeah. Nope. Go ahead.
I'm trying to identify when a flood is going to occur. It's not really within the scope of.
What was the question?
The question was, with the weather warming up, potential rain next week, and the amount of snow, what's the likelihood of a flood coming? I believe one of the online resources that Bill had identified has identified that there may be some upcoming flood, low-level flooding. It's not necessarily within the scope of what a civil engineer specifically does. And in addition to that, it's really difficult to tell exactly what is going to occur with the weather. So the ability to estimate out in the future and tell everybody a specific date, that'd be significantly beyond our capacity to do.
Yeah, so the upshot of that is, we may not have a lot of time to do something. So it may not be a good time to be complacent. It may be that you should start doing some of the things that need to be done, like organizing on your block immediately, because the weather may not give us a lot of time. Go ahead.
My name is Mike Coughlin. I live at the 308 Bridge, and I've been watching some very impressive work going on with the engineers and what's going on in Rock Creek. I'm also very disturbed and worried about the disposition of the creek bed of Rock Creek. I'm assuming that the runoff will probably happen no later than 2 weeks, but that will the engineers, everyone who's working on that, will they make adjustments so that that area will be safe?
So that's been a concern since the beginning. And so the 14th of June, we started discussing that. that volume of material that came down is incredible. And they went from, that was a persistent ask and something that was done to survey that bottom to see what that difference looked like. And specific, they started at the football field and they went to the 308 bridge, and it's an undulation, and that undulation is anywhere from 1 to 5 or 6 feet. It's not universal, but like the water dumped it where it did, so there's some difference with that. It's another jam up right now insofar as moving that. It's referred to as dredging. That's a pretty significant word, but there's a lot of material in there. The ask is going to continue to be that that's going to be allowed to be removed, high and dried, and taken out of there.
But will this be done before we reach an emergency state? Yes, I agree, there was a lot of material.
I think we're up to our,
Bags of material.
I don't know, 400 or 500 ask. We've asked, we've pled, we've begged, we've knocked up the chain. This needs to be done. It's an ongoing issue. I think the next step is the President of the United States, if we can find that. That's where we're at. We have depleted our congressional delegation, and that has to be brought out on both sides of this equation. Our senators, our congressmen, they're available with a phone call. We've been at them, we've been in their hip pocket, we've had multiple face-to-faces. These have been asks, these have been begs, continually. They're doing all they can, but they're fighting a monster in the bureaucratic nightmare that is Army Corps, and we're trying to get some headway. And like I said, we've been relentless on this, and we're making little bits of headway, but can't give a deadline, I can't give a date, because they can't.
So Mike, so here's where we are, Mike. Your concerns are shared by others. They've been trying to get a response, and they haven't been able to do that. So the end result is we need to do what we can to protect ourselves, and your concerns are valid, but there's not anything we can do, and talking about it further just is not going to move this ball forward. Okay?
But I'm still concerned, will there be some kind of adjustment to all the machinery that's going on there and the engineers and how they are anticipating how the next few weeks are going to change? So
And you've expressed your concern. It's shared by others, and there have been efforts to try to move the problem along and solve the problem, and it hasn't been successful.
And I commend them for that.
Okay.
There's a gal standing up.
Yes.
I think she can.
Chateau Rouge, way up yonder. What I'm wondering is there a website or something where I can print out evacuation plans? Because if we get full of guests, we have the potential of having over, 70, 80 different families throughout this period that we're worried about. How to get them safely up to airport, over to Wyoming, Colorado, wherever our staging area might end up. Is there any way that we can access that as business people where we can just go, at check-in, here's your evacuation plan, just in case, and that way we've got all of that on board now, rather than hoping I can get it printed out and one power goes out.
Okay, I think that is a question that should be addressed to the city at its next meeting, which would be, I believe, this coming Tuesday. So I think you might want to go to the city council meeting and ask that question and see if you can get the city to provide that assistance.
Yeah, it's just more, I just want to make sure that our guests are safe, so.
Is there somebody in the back standing?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
My question is about the 8th Street.
There's actually somebody behind you that's...
Yeah, go ahead.
All right, you're next, and then the lady behind you. Go ahead.
My question is about the 8th Street Bridge, which no longer exists. I understand that there are plans to place a temporary bridge to remediate the coal pile that's sliding into Rock Creek. And my question is if there's any time frame of when that's going to happen, if it's going to be before or after the spring runoff.
Bill?
Not my circus, not my monkey. That's a city.
Okay, well, that's another question you need to address to the city council, and I suggest you go to the meeting on Tuesday night. It starts at 6, I believe, in City Hall. The lady now.
I know
Go ahead, Sandy.
I too did not leave when I was evacuated. Don't yell at me. But I have 2 crazy dogs, and I certainly wasn't going to take them to the fairgrounds with all the other crazy dogs and cats. So I talked to Marcella Emanuel, and she said that up at the fairgrounds, in the ag buildings, there's a horse barn, there are pig enclosures, there is lots of places up there that you can cage your animals. And I'm sure that the county commissioners will open up those buildings for the animals. There actually is a handout. With the consent of the fair board. But I understand that. The other thing that I thought is that you should also contact your veterinarian and try to get a phone number that if you could possibly, like what I did, they evacuated me at 1 in the morning and I watched the water creep into the yard, and then at 6 a.m. I left with my crazy dogs, put them in the car, and sat in front of Grizzly Peak until they opened at 10. So, pardon? Call who? A realtor. Yeah, Heather says call a realtor, they'll come and get your animals. Don't do that. Realtors have crazy animals too. So anyway, I would actually talk to your veterinarian and let them know your concerns, and is there a number that you can contact them directly, and then go over and board your animals. So.
I actually, for the past 2 years, when we were dealing with all that, I've got a bunch of animals, so I contacted shelters up in Billings, and sometimes based on whoever gets there first, they can take them.
What she said is there are some shelters up in Billings that if you contact them, they can also take them in. So don't do like I did, and I'll be better next time, I promise. I think that's a Girl Scout promise. Could be Boy Scout. Anyway, yeah, so don't avoid evacuation because your animals are places that you can take them.
Go ahead.
So do we know if they're being take out the sandbags at Rock Creek or not?
I'm sorry?
Do we know if they're being take out those sandbags at Rock Creek? By the bridge?
That's a construction issue. That's their design build process, and that's a construction issue with the contractor in the state of Montana. I wouldn't count on them being forever. I don't know, and I don't think they don't, because like I said, they're building as they design this, and so they're finishing everything as they're getting it done and moving on to the next. So that's a good question for them. I don't have that answer.
All right, I have a question for the experts. Is there any way that a homeowner can raise their yard in order to try to push the water away that would be effective?
So this question would be very dependent on specifically where your property is and the slope of your property. This would be why we suggested that if you would like to talk to us about it, it would be helpful for us to come look at your specific property. But a couple of things on it. If you're going to be trying to fill your property, trying to slope or grade water away, one of the most important things is the type of material that you would be using. You want to use a clay type material, and you want to get it vegetated. Realistically, the material that you're putting down is not going to be the thing that holds it in place. The vegetation is going to be what holds it in place. Trying to do it immediately before a flood, you're very likely to have erosion issues occur with it. So it's something that you want to be doing significantly ahead of time. You want to be doing it in August, in September, so that it's vegetated and well grown before it gets to next year's weather. So.
Go ahead.
Are there any mitigation plans in case the brush and trees starts getting up against the bridges and clean that out before it's flooded by the county on county bridge?
We're waiting to see whether our benevolent state leaders provide us with resources to remove debris piles.
What if it doesn't get removed?
We're going to deal with it when the time comes. I mean, it's a tense, uncertain, and rapidly evolving situation. We don't know until it happens.
Is there any plans on equipment being there to grab that stuff?
I wouldn't put $400,000 excavator in a person in that level of jeopardy. If we can push them down to get them through, what, pardon?
To protect the city.
I also believe in protecting our property and the lives of our employees. Thank you.
Did you have a question? Go ahead.
Right now, the storm sewers are blocked by all the snow and ice that's been pushed into the corners of the blocks. Does anybody here have the information as to whether there's any kind of plowing or equipment still gonna work on that before this next weekend's weather?
That's a city council question. I suggest you go
That's the
to
mayor,
the city.
Jim Bushnell and the mayor.
Okay, so if you go to the city council meeting on Tuesday, they should be able to answer that.
But
Jim?
if warm up before that, so.
Call the mayor.
Yeah.
If you have a storm drain that's blocked, I clear mine in front of Market 55 all the time, or I get a dam in front of my business. So I just go out and clear the snow over it. But if you have one that you're particularly worried about, I would call Jim Bushnell and he may be able to send someone over with a loader to help clear it.
All right, I'm gonna have Terry Durbin come up now, and we're probably gonna wrap this up because it's obvious that we've kind of reached the point where we've answered most of the questions. And we're gonna be here, so if you have a question that hasn't been answered, you'll have a chance. This is your third question, so go ahead. No, it's your third, but go ahead. I'll argue with you.
Okay, so we had a serious issue with getting water to the school parking lot last year, immediately after the flood. I think that's something that needs to be addressed.
That's not for this session. That would be a city council question. So I would strongly urge you, I would urge everybody to go to the next city council meeting to get answers from the city on a lot of these things.
What time is the city council?
6 o'clock on Tuesday at City Hall.
Yeah, so let me just clarify. So the city council meetings are the second and fourth Tuesdays of the month. On a lot of these questions, if you're going to ask you a question, it won't be answered during that time. So a better thing for you to do would be to call the city and talk to the mayor or one of the department heads, for example, Jim Bushnell, if it's something with Public Works, and talk to them directly. Because they're really the ones that can answer on this. It's not going to really be, but we always welcome you at the city council meetings. We cover a lot of issues that you may be interested in, but really connecting them to the mayor and the department heads directly is probably your best bet. Okay, I want to thank everybody for coming. We had an amazing turnout. We thank you for spending your time here, and everybody's going to be available over here in the bar area for you to talk afterwards. So thank you again. Appreciate it.